PSY 307, Study Session 5, the Disability Discrimination Act. Introduction. The aim of this lecture is to introduce you to the Disability Discrimination Act, DDA, which was introduced in 1995. The 1995 and 2005 Acts have introduced and exerted laws aimed at ending discrimination against disabled people, with disability defined as a physical mental impairment which has a substantial long-term effect on a person's ability to carry out day-to-day activities, and have given disabled people new rights in relation to the discussion highlights below. Objectives. At the end of the lecture, you should be able to 1. Discuss what the Disability Discrimination Act, DDA, meant. 2. Highlight and explain the new rights of the disabled people. Content. The DDA approaches disability in a strange and unique way. The key part of the definition follows a medical approach, as it is all about what a person is unable to do. However, many of the additional provisions within the definition seem to realize that people can face discrimination, the legal term for barriers, without needing to be impaired to any great degree. For example, it allows for coverage of those with progressive conditions before the adverse effect on day-to-day activities becomes substantial, and protects people living with HIV, MS, or cancer from the point of diagnosis. In its wider operation, the DDA seems to recognize the need to overcome barriers, and that the responsibility for these barriers is external to the disabled person. This is why there are requirements within the Act for reasonable adjustment to be made. The Disability Discrimination Act, DDA, was introduced in 1995 after persistent lobbying by disabled people and their representative organizations for comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation. The 1995 Act has been amended by the Disability Discrimination Act 2005, which received royal assent in April 2005. The 1995 and 2005 Act have introduced and exerted laws aimed at ending discrimination against disabled people. With disability defined as a physical mental impairment which has a substantial long-term effect on a person's ability to carry out day-to-day activities, and gave disabled people new rights in relation to 1. Access to goods, facilities, and services. All organizations that provide goods, services, or facilities to the general public, excluding transport and education, which are dealt with elsewhere in the Act, must offer a service to disabled people equal to that offered to non-disabled people. It is unlawful to refuse to serve or provide a second-rate service to people because they are disabled. Service providers may need to make alterations to the way they provide a service, and they may also be required to adapt their premises to improve physical access to their service. 2. Buying or renting land or property. It is against the law to treat a disabled person less favorably when he or she is buying or renting land or property such as house, flat, or business premises. For example, it is unlawful to charge a disabled person a higher deposit on rented accommodation, or to refuse him or her accommodation on the grounds of disability, perhaps making prejudgments on the suitability of the accommodation or the ability of the disabled person to pay. 3. Employment. The Act makes it unlawful for an employment with 15 or more employees, originally 20, to be reduced to 1 from 2004, to discriminate against disabled employees or job applicants if the physical features of the work premises or the working arrangements are preventing a disabled person gaining or staying in employment, then the employer must take reasonable steps to alleviate these barriers. The employer may be required to obtain special equipment or to adapt existing equipment to enable a disabled person to do all or parts of his or her job that would otherwise be impossible or unreasonably difficult. Assistance with his disability is likely to be available under the Access to Work scheme from the Employment Service. 4. Education. The DDA builds upon existing legislation that specifically relates to education, in which education providers have a duty to provide mainstream placements for disabled children, subject to the wishes of their parents, providing the placement is appropriate to the needs of the child, does not conflict with the interest of other children in the school, and it is an efficient use of resources. Schools must include in their annual sports their arrangements for admitting disabled pupils, the way they will ensure that disabled pupils will be treated equally, and facilities they provide to enable disabled pupils to access the education they are offering. Further and higher education establishments are required to publish disability statements that include, for example, the facilities that they have for disabled students, for details of the Special Education Needs and Disability Act, which has brought education more fully into the scope of the DDA. Contact the Council for Disabled Children of Skill, National Bureau for Disabled Students. 5. Transport. Access to transport infrastructures, such as stations, covered by the Access to Goods and Services, part of the DDA. For the transport vehicles and themselves, the DDA gives the government powers to make accessibility regulations to make them accessible to disabled people. For example, all new rail vehicles entering service since 1999 and all new buses and coaches since 2000 have had to comply with accessibility regulations, as do all new taxis. From 2005, all new buses and coaches must be wheelchair accessible. The DDA set up two independent statutory bodies: the National Disability Council and the Northern Ireland Disability Council, to advise the government about disability issues and on the implementation of the Act. In April 2000, the National Disability Council was replaced by the Disability Rights Commission, Equality Commission in Northern Ireland. The work of the Commission includes working towards eliminating disability discrimination and promoting equal opportunities, providing advice and information, preparing codes of practice, investigating claims of discrimination, and ensuring compliance with the law, and advising the government on desired legislative changes. Summary. In this lecture, we have discussed the major related rights to disability, Discrimination Act, DDA, and the concept of DDA itself. End of study session 5. Thank you for listening.